Welcome to ESPN. Today we have a special on sports in the 20th century. Although sports grew on a national and global level throughout this period, the U.S. was also caught in a rough place, battling internal and international tensions. These came as a result of events such as World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, and the Cold War. In this time of deep despair and sometimes disappointment, the U.S. looked towards its athletes to unite the nation.
The origins of sports in America can be traced back to the Native Americans. Natives obviously had variations of sports and different activities based on where they lived. The most famous of these native sports was lacrosse. Europeans soon came to modify the sport later in the 20th century. As the years passed by and millions of immigrants poured into the United States, they brought their sports and culture with them. Sports for many Americans in the 20th century became an escape. For a majority of Americans, life was not filled with prosperity, and many people had to work for hours on end. With sports, people were able to escape from the stress of their everyday lives. Kids could go hit some balls in the yard, or adults could turn on the radio and tune into the ball game. Year after year, participation in sports increased. All different types of demographics joined the sports movement. Blacks, Latinos, women, Asians, the youth, and other minority groups. Throughout the 20th century, despite growing racial tensions, sports unearthed a major confidence boost which fostered a national and cultural identity of human rights and democratic policies in both domestic and foreign affairs.
In the realm of athletics, nothing is more paramount than the Olympic Games. Beginning in 776 BC, the Olympic Games began in Greece, acting only as a competition for the best gladiators, testing their endurance and strength. The Games progressed throughout history as nation upon nation became interested in the Games. They had become a worldwide Games and had evolved into the modern Olympic Games by 1896. Along with new formats and inclusion of new events, the U.S. took part in its first Games in 1896 in Athens, Greece. The first Olympic team consisted of only 14 intrepid athletes. Despite leaving in the midst of controversy, the athletes continued with their trek to the Games, competing in events such as track and field and swimming. Returning with 11 Olympic championships, the athletes were welcomed home with support. While spreading their talents worldwide, the U.S. also spread the idea of Olympics to their citizens. With a nation behind them, America turned into a dominant nation, claiming huge amounts of gold medals every 4 years. The 20th century was home to some of the most furious, contested controversies. However, the Olympics brought them nationalism when they needed it most. Through the Civil Rights Acts and McCarthyism, the Olympics were dominant forces bringing the nation together. A few athletes every 4 years could tie the nation together with a sense of nationalism that seemed unbreakable.
Insane. Carlemont. Shooting it into the American end again. Morrow is back there. Now Johnson, 19 seconds. Johnson over to Ramsey. Bilyaletdinov gets checked by Ramsey. McClanahan is there. The puck is still loose. 11 seconds. You've got 10 seconds. The countdown going on right now. Morrow up to Schultz. 5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
The Olympics began to play a huge role in American lives as they began to feel a sort of pride in how their teams competed. In this instance, the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team won what would later be called the Miracle on Ice. Going into the 1980 Winter Olympic Games, the U.S. and the USSR were enemies both on and off the ice. In the real world, the game was during the Cold War, in which the U.S. was attempting to stop the USSR's spread of communism. On the ice, the USSR was clearly the more dominant team, having some of the best hockey players in the world. The U.S. team, however, consisted of a dozen or so college hockey players led by Herb Brooks. The team, despite losing to the USSR earlier on in the tournament, was set to play their rivals in the semifinals. The U.S. was not expected to even contest the game, much rather come out as victors. As the game approached, it became much more than just a hockey game, but instead the clashing of two nations and what they stand for. As Mike Urazzoni scored the winning goal for the U.S., he and his teammates couldn't have even understood the extent to which this would help the nation. Coming out as the champions, the team not only brought back joy and pride, but also instilled confidence in the U.S. government that would lead to the end of the Cold War. Shortly after this miracle on ice, new President Ronald Reagan began his more assertive foreign policy towards communism and the USSR. Within years, the USSR was broken down and communism had met its end.
On March 3, 1931, the Star-Spangled Banner was considered the national anthem of the United States and eventually played at every baseball game in the future. As the anthem's popularity increased, other sports followed by performing the anthem before their games. The anthem itself was created from the War of 1812 by Francis Scott Key. Though it took more than a century to nationally recognize the Star-Spangled Banner, the song fosters great amounts of nationalism and unity. Throughout the 20th century, the anthem has been used to show American nationalism in even the worst of times. As more and more people sang the national anthem, it was considered an honor to perform the anthem in front of thousands of fans.
A ragged rim of splintered trees on a hill close to Huntington's Tri-State Airport shows where the DC-9, carrying the Marshall University football team and others, scraped yesterday before piling into the next hill. Special FBI agents are working over the charred remains of the planes, 75 passengers and crew. At least 46 of the bodies are those of Marshall football players and coaches.
The year was 1970, and the Marshall University football team was playing an away game at East Carolina University. After a 17-14 loss, the team boarded Flight 932 back to Huntington, West Virginia. And as they were approaching their landing, the plane hit trees and crash landed. At 7:36 p.m., November 14th, 1970, the plane crashed and 75 people were killed. As this tragic event happened, the community around Marshall suffered greatly. In addition to this, the 6 players that did not take the trip were left with extreme amounts of guilt and depression. In order to try to forget this tragic event, the Marshall University football team believed that playing football would be the best way to bring the community back together. The football team the next year only won 2 games, but the fans did not care because they were the ones supporting Marshall University no matter what.
Jackie Robinson was the most hated man in the world. There was no one else who could comprehend his loneliness, his isolation. It wasn't until the Dodgers went on the road and his teammates saw how he was turned away at the front desk of the hotels that even a hardcore Southerner like Eddie Stanky could see that this was a social injustice.
Up until Jackie Robinson's career took off, baseball in the United States was strictly segregated, forcing African Americans to play in completely different baseball leagues called the Negro Leagues. Baseball was just one of the many things in the United States that heavily discriminated against African Americans. However, Jackie Robinson helped destroy the barriers of skin color by sparking the integration of baseball in America, turning the sport into a national pastime. From the year of Robinson's debut in 1947 to 1984, the African American population in the major leagues continuously increased from 0.9% to 18.4%. This increase in African American MLB players did wonders for American culture, for both white and black Americans. For blacks, Robinson created a whole new spectrum of opportunity in the world of sports. African American kids around the country now had a role model of their own color to aspire and relate to, and they could finally see professional sports as a real option for their future. Additionally, because Robinson was performing so well in a league dominated by whites, even becoming one of the best players in the league, he catalyzed the issue of social equality in all aspects of society around the country.
Mr. Robinson, what was it like breaking the color barrier? Were you afraid?
To be honest, I was very fearful. I didn't really know how white folks would react to me stepping on the field, but I knew what I was doing was bigger than baseball. It was a big step for the African American community, and I think it's a step in the right direction.
Last question. Do you think your playing has fostered a feeling of unity and nationalism among all Americans or created more tension between races?
You know, I think that's a really tough question, but I think change is really difficult for everyone. I don't know if the white people of America are really ready to accept me playing. I think right now it can cause more tensions than needed, but I think overall it's a step in the right direction. As more and more black people join the league, it's becoming more competitive, and I think it, in the end, will foster a feeling of nationalism and unity among Americans. Sports in the 20th century have embodied some of the principles of this great nation. A hardworking attitude. Every great athlete discussed worked incredibly hard behind the scenes to live in fame to this day. Persistence. Getting knocked down and getting up again. Every athlete has hit a slump and had to get out of it. For example, Babe Ruth was leading his team in strikeouts at some points, but that did not stop him from setting the record for most home runs. Lastly, defiance. Jackie Robinson and other great athletes defied the rules and standards of sports. Underdogs rise to the occasion and recreate the rules. There are numerous examples in history. Washington and his men, they were the underdogs, but with persistence, hardworkingness, and defiance, they prevailed. Sports in this era have defined the nation. They have become a symbol for American equality and set the standards for what it means to be American. Sports bring people together, and that's exactly what they've done to this nation. They've brought Americans of different backgrounds together and truly fostered a sense of nationalism.
That's all for today, folks. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to tune in next time as we delve into the uses of steroids throughout the history of the MLB.